today with Kayleen. Kayleen has been fun to teach. She's been one of a group of kids that I call the overachievers in the back. And if I ever gave an assignment that says I need a short paragraph, I could expect a page and probably 2 pages. Is that right? 2 pages?
No.
Yeah, 2 pages from Kayleen. All right, please come on in, find a place to sit. If you have to sit in the chairs or on the floor, that's fine. There's seats over here. There's 2 in the middle. Okay, let's get started. So these are Kayleen's words. She says, first and foremost, I would like to thank God for allowing me to go through every process, every high and low of doing my thesis, and finally giving me the strength to make it this far to deliver my thesis. I would like to thank my family, my parents and my sister, for being by my side to support me through every up and down. This includes my cousins who have patiently sat on our grandmother's couch listening to me yap my heart out, and who have taken this time to read through the whole draft and help me brainstorm on trying to make sure every part was studied. I would like to thank Mr. Wade. See how this was supposed to be a short paragraph, but it's like a page and a half.
I'm sorry, sir.
That's okay, though. That's you're an overachiever. That's right.
I'm sorry.
I would like to thank Mr. Wade and Miss Denise for being patient with me for all my long overdue assignments. I would like to thank Miss Denise and Mr. Tony for being my panelists. I would like to thank my advisor, Mr. Felix, for all the inputs and the reassurance when I thought I was making things up. I would also like to thank every teacher who I have bothered for the past week on a very short notice and still took their time to help me out. Finally, I would like to thank my friends for all the loving hits on my head, telling me to work on my thesis. I apologize for making a lot of you remember my entire exordium with how many times I've repeated it. Yeah, I've heard several people report reciting your exordium.
I hope that's a good impression.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. I couldn't have made it this far without every one of you. Her thesis title is Tag You're It, How Radioactive Marking Ends Wildlife Trafficking Chains. Give me a second to start the timer, and I'll tell you when you can start. All right, you can start when ready.
One drafty afternoon. On the 19th of March, 2018, a northern white rhino rested his head for the very last time on the dusty grounds of the old Payeta Conservancy in Kenya. Sudan was only 2 years old when an animal trapper caught him and 6 other northern white rhinos to be brought to a zoo in Czechia. There, he spent 34 long years wondering when he'd get the chance to roam the lands of Africa and meet his friends again. Outside of the zoo gates, unbeknownst to Sudan, wildlife trafficking had completely wiped out the subspecies to its edge. After 1980, only 13 of the rhinos remained in the wild, as conservationists discussed Sudan and his offspring's moves to the conservancy in an effort to stop the extinction. By the time he made it out of the zoo, Sudan was the only male of the subspecies left. There were no more northern white rhinos in the wild, with poachers ruthlessly killing them all for their horns. Breeding programs were deemed unsuccessful. All the other species of rhinos were rapidly decreasing in numbers, as it seems that the poachers were winning the war against wildlife. In the final years of his life, Sudan felt the light at the end of the tunnel slowly going dim. He laid his head on the ground, his heart shattering to pieces shortly before his life followed. Sudan was inevitably euthanized, marking the functional extinction of the subspecies. The hashtag Last Male Standing became a social media sensation right after the death of Sudan, the whole world grieving along. Devastatingly, in a world where we could give him sympathy, we failed to give him a future. Where wildlife trafficking remains the biggest challenge to extinction these days, we could once again only wonder, what if this all could have been prevented from the first place? So, what if I told you then that nuclear science could be a solution to this? Principles of wildlife conservation date back to the Mosaic Laws in the 15th century BC, with concepts of protected areas and codified laws being based solely on religion and ethics. Over the centuries, the basis for the preservation of wildlife evolved as European nobilities claimed exclusive rights over animals for sports, ultimately making poaching a capital offense in 1723. However, wildlife conservation only rose to popularity in the 19th century CE, as Charles Darwin's Origins of Species laid the scientific groundwork that eventually gave rise to organizations like CITES, the Convention of International Trade of Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna. Nuclear science didn't come into the picture until the 1950s, as a huge step in wildlife forensics. Since then, nuclear science has been developed to not only solve cold cases, but also prevent wildlife trafficking until the Isotope Project emerged only recently. This project utilizes radioactive isotopes injected into the keratins of rhinoceros horns, acting as both a deterrent and detection device. These radioactive isotopes, or radioisotopes, are unstable versions of chemical elements trying to gain stability through a process called radioactive decay. The nuclei of these atoms release energy spontaneously through a variety of particle decays, emitting radiation in a particular intensity and time that defines their half-life. Animals have always played an important role in human life. When God handed us the responsibility to care for the animals in Genesis, He permitted the use of animals for resources. But He emphasized that the animals were to be treated with responsibility and compassion. However, our sinful nature had only turned that care into exploitation, and that exploitation had only led to extinction. Ever since the loss of dinosaurs 65 million years ago, the world is currently experiencing the worst rates of species extinction. Recent efforts have never really worked out, having only given attention to other problems. Thus, radioactive marking, through the various different ways of nuclear science, serves as one of the most effective solutions in combating wildlife trafficking through three different reasons. First, its ecological benefits. Second, its redefinition of crime. And third, the economic security that it brings. Nonetheless, where wildlife trafficking is often referred to as the illegal trade, smuggling, poaching, or capture of non-human animals or plants that are indigenous or exotic, including their derivatives, this thesis is confined to non-human animals, excluding plants. As numerous technologies and methods to combat wildlife trafficking has emerged through the years, nuclear science is a method that effectively ensures ecological benefits while combating transnational crimes. The use of nuclear science prioritizes the animal's health and welfare while providing protection. The radioactive isotopes used have gone through exhaustive laboratory processes, ensuring that the animal's health stays unaffected. The calculated dosage is kept in the concept of as low as reasonably achievable in a way that serves its detectability but also maintain conservational purposes. However, the Isotope Project is also prioritizing the transparency of animal handling, allowing a dense system where committees have rights to review over protocols, as the Isotope Project works under the WIT's animal ethics clearances. Compared to other conventional methods, nuclear science is also more sustainable and less destructive to the environment. As the usage of radioactive isotopes causes uncontrollable negative biological effects, there are still ways to gain control over other variables, as older studies show the scientists successfully going over the harmful particle decays while maintaining detectability. Yet, the Isotope Project takes it up another notch and uses non-toxic and non-leachable isotopes, ensuring that the compound is unlikely to dissolve and release contaminants into the environment, therefore keeping it safe. Radioactive marking is also ecologically efficient with its compatibility with already present detection systems. From the very beginning, The Risotope project has been specifically designed to use the radioisotopes detectable to radiation portal monitors, or RPMs, effectively reducing the amount of additional material needed for transmitters and receivers in detection devices. When a radioactive marked specimen passes through these RPMs, it triggers visible and audible alarms, possibly even prompting facility lockdown. Further legal actions will then be taken. With just the injection of radioactive isotopes, the detection of wildlife trafficking can certainly be applicable all around the world. Unfortunately, assuring ecological welfare has not been enough in convincing the use of anti-trafficking efforts. Wildlife trafficking is often referred to as a victimless crime, where both parties receive what they desire. But let's think it through. Is it truly victimless? In a transnational crime, where the harvesters are often oppressed by intermediaries and consumers, the increase of new technologies and law enforcement has never worked out so easily. Thus, nuclear science becomes a solution to this by redefining the general definition of the crime. First, as an anti-trafficking effort, nuclear science is specifically designed to increase the scope of law enforcement. So far, science have single-handedly provided the international framework for environmental laws, but that itself has not been enough in combating such a crime. By expanding the focus of the crime not only on environmental laws, nuclear science strengthens law enforcement by enabling nuclear security to take action. The radioactive isotopes on the specimen legally classifies it as a radioactive material out of regulatory control, or also known as MORC, which falls right under the scope of nuclear laws. The International Atomic Energy Agency's Nuclear Security Series highlights the obligation for the government to facilitate the legal action taken in regards to any kind of radioactive MORCs, including further advancements of radioactive marking. Second, the use of nuclear science allows for concentrated law enforcement on certain geographical areas and criminal organizations. As the detectability of the radioactive marked specimen has been guaranteed, criminal organizations, their smuggling routes, and the geographical origins can certainly be traceable. Hence, security can be strengthened in these areas. This will act as choke points that eventually disrupt the flow of the crime. Yet, justice is deemed worthless if it ignores the vulnerable. Enforcing the laws could be a threat to humanitarian issues, as the local group's economic reliance in participating in criminal activities are mostly due to exploitation done by intermediaries and consumers. By shifting to choke points, this catches the intermediaries accountable for their actions, thus eliminating the motivator and decreasing the demand for the harmful exploitation of wildlife. Wildlife trafficking is one of the biggest parts that take up environmental crime. But do we actually know what the term environment behind it means? Is it perhaps just a perceivable animals in distress? According to Ruther and Bishop, environment implies everything that's immediately surrounding the situational factors that can influence criminal activities. This includes the criminal groups themselves, their motivation, demand, methods, and the animals themselves. Therefore, nuclear science serves as a deterrent to suppress the demands of wildlife trafficking. Deterrence itself is defined as the effort to reduce the likelihood of deviance in fear of detection and punishments for the offense. The situational crime prevention theory helps explain this, as radioactive marking increases the efforts and risks of trafficking, hence reducing the reward from a valuable specimen to a radioactive one. This ultimately decreases the demand for the harmful exploitation of wildlife, as the radioactivity deters consumers from wanting it. Combating wildlife trafficking has never been easy to do. And in terms of economics, it does not get any better. Every process, starting from the development to the execution itself, needs money. With that, the use of radioactive marking serves as a solution to provide economic security. Poverty is one of the two main enabling factors of poachernomics, which is defined as a poaching-based economy driven by persistent consumer demand and market speculation. An ideal way of dismantling it is by making sure that the local socioeconomic incentives for conservation is higher than any incentive brought by criminal groups to pursue poaching. Nuclear science stays true to this, acting as a market correction. Through its deterrence properties, the devaluation of specimens makes it undesirable at any price point, therefore creating a market crash. Where the market for illegal economies no longer provide any incentives, this pivots the focus into alternative livelihoods where the incentives still prosper. On top of that, the use of nuclear science is a socio-economically beneficial method with its compatibility with already present systems. Protecting high-value species, as many scientists have agreed, is expensive, while maintaining conservation actually requires the socioeconomic benefits to be higher than any conservation costs. In terms of visual efficiency, the Radioactive project is efficient with its compatibility with already existing technologies, like the RPMs, effectively saving a total of $3.2 billion for nuclear infrastructure, hence decreasing the marginal cost of catching MORCs to as low as zero. Furthermore, the Radioactive project is cost-effective in comparison to dehorning, in which Professor Larkin describes the cost to be similar, but lasting in a shorter time span with additional logistical costs. In addition, combating wildlife trafficking through nuclear science boosts the nation's gross domestic product, or more commonly known as GDP. Data from 2021 shows that Africa loses approximately $50 million in GDP to illicit financial flows, in which wildlife trafficking covers at least a third of it. The Radioactive project, in the midst of their conservation, allows money to flow to legal economies, where the stable growth of the nation's GDP is accompanied by the stable alternative livelihoods for local communities. Take the Greater Kruger National Park as South Africa's primary engine for ecotourism and conservation. The GKNP contributes roughly $162 million to $417 million to the nation's GDP, while supporting over 10,000 jobs with an average salary of $7,000. Furthermore, by shifting the focus of the nation's market from illegal economies while allowing ecotourism to take over, radioactive marking enables the steady growth of the nation's GDP. Nonetheless, some may argue that wildlife trafficking can still persist as corruption remains unaddressed. Corruption, indeed, is one of the two main enabling factors of poachernomics. A way that this could happen is by creating an exclusive transport pathway that overrides detection systems, including through bribery. However, I can assure you that with radioactive marked specimen, corruption is no longer feasible. Transporting a radioactive marked specimen that costs about $20,000 to $400,000 per kilogram without getting caught by RPMs is nearly impossible. This argument fails to realize the scale in which RPMs acts in as a continuously developing technology effective globally. These RPMs cannot be easily deactivated even when bribery happens, as every radioactive specimen passing through would eventually be evaluated by centralized nuclear security committees. In addition, even when these nodes are skipped, radiation monitors equivalent to the RPMs are effective replacement to detect MORCs in naval and air patrols. People also may argue that the market deterrence provided by the Radioactive project creates a crash that raises humanitarian issues instead of correcting the economy. A comparison to this is the Mexican opium crisis, a drug market crash that began in 2014. The United States has been the primary market for heroin since the 1970s, but that all changed when illegal Chinese pharmacies started advertising fentanyl as an addition or replacement to heroin. The Americans were convinced, and the market for heroin crashed down. Marginalized populations in Mexico that had depended their whole lives in supplying opium poppy to the heroin market then momentarily shifted their focus into alternative livelihoods such as local agriculture. But that also didn't last long. It resulted on mass migrations over to neighboring countries where they could still work as drug suppliers. This created a major humanitarian issue both in Mexico and their neighboring countries, blossoming a new issue of illegal forced migrations. So, then people may argue, what's exactly stopping the wildlife market crash from resulting in these same humanitarian issues? Still, as much as drugs and wildlife are two of the most profitable transnational crimes, meeting eye to eye in many aspects, wildlife and drugs still differ, in which drugs is a non-depletable resource, while wildlife is a depletable resource. By differentiating its finite and reproducible properties, it completely erases the possibility of illegal migrations. Devaluing the specimen does not only erase the market in that certain area, but also in every area that there is, adding to the fact that a portion of these trafficked animals are endemic to certain areas. Therefore, it leaves no choice but for the local communities to be redirected into alternative livelihoods. Throughout this thesis, we have explored how radioactive marking could be a solution to combating wildlife trafficking. Returning back to the story of Sudan, we could once again only wonder, what if this all could have been implemented decades ago, centuries ago, trying to prevent poachers from killing all the remaining northern white rhinos in the wild? But look, the light hasn't completely gone out. There are still 5 species of rhinos and 44,000 other endangered species of animals in our care. And it becomes our job to make sure that Sudan's story doesn't take a second orbit around the world. But it also leaves us to this: developing the technology and taking it as far as it can go. The Rhizotope project is far from perfect, and this is just the beginning. Further enhancements could be done to ease the expansion over to high-demand animals in the market. But the magic of science only works when it's hand in hand with laws and economies. Starting from biodiverse countries with an abundance of wildlife, laws should slowly be custom-fitted into combating the crime with nuclear infrastructure, such as RPMs. Finally, the support from communities, both through local and global awareness of the positive impacts of nuclear science, becomes the key to success. So, if the tiniest of particle decays could create such a big difference in the world, there is no stopping any of us from making this world a better place. Thank you.
Thank you. Good job, Kayleen. Our panelists today are Mr. Tony and Ms. Denise. We'll start with Mr. Tony.
Test. Kayleen, wow, it's one of the most excited time for me to hear your speech. I have a very enjoyable time reading your thesis. It was one of the strongest, and the speech also is excellent. Well done, yeah?
Thank you very much, Mr.
Yeah. It's very difficult to argue with you, but I try to do my part.
Yes.
Even though I'm reading your thesis and listening to your presentation, I think there are some area that I still don't understand. So perhaps you can clarify first. You mentioned a little bit about RPM and the detection. Can you explain how it works?
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Tony, for the question. So RPMs, or also known as radiation portal monitors, are actually technologies developed to detect the level of radiation, and also for certain monitors, the type of radiation that occurs in a certain area. And that is mostly implemented in airports, harbors, or cross-border systems in a way of fixed monitor systems, in which then shipment cargoes and all the other vehicles that would be transported would have to pass through these RPMs. So with that, it ensures the detectability of any type of radiation. And also, these radiation portal monitors comes in many forms. So that's not only the fixed radiation monitors that I told you about, but could be also in terms of Geiger counters and a lot of other handheld monitors, including vehicle monitors.
Okay, so this has been, so there are many RPMs around and that can be used to and compatible with this technology that you are sharing, yeah?
Yes.
Then the next one that I would like to clarify is the term that you use, SIA.
SIA, yes.
That biological GPS, how it works with the technology that you are using.
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. So, stable isotope analysis, or SIA, is actually a secondary part of nuclear science, in which a huge part of my speech before was explaining more on the active side of combating, which is the radioactive marking. But stable isotope analysis is a way of using radioactivity for forensics. So it's basically, it started from the World War II, where the bomb doubled the amounts of carbon-14 in the world, and that carbon-14 was then implanted into every animal, every species, and also a lot of different things around the world. So with that, every region has a distinct ratio of isotopes, including those naturally occurring isotopes such as carbon-14. And stable isotope analysis takes these specimens and analyze the different ratio, and then track it back into their geographical origins, where they have been through, and everything. So,
yeah, okay.
that be
Thank
enough?
you for explaining.
Yes, thank you very much.
Very good. So you understand those very well. Now let's start with that information. Yeah. With any kind of detecting device,
Yes.
I believe there is one way or the other to prevent it from working. Let's say the easiest one is if you are using X-rays.
Yes.
There is some metal that can block X-rays completely.
Yes.
Is there any that you know of that can metal or any kind of things that can block this traceability or detection of the isotope that you use?
For that, I actually have addressed this in my first refutation, in which I explained about the lead boxes. I briefly explained about the lead boxes that would be able to, in a way, stop these radiation signals from going outside. But then again, we have to focus on how these radioactive marked specimen would have to go through, like the processes that they would have to go through, starting from the source countries to then the consumers. So basically, they would have to go through X-rays, like you have mentioned, and these lead boxes would be able to hide these signals and stop these signals from being detected by radiation portal monitors. But then again, as it would pass through the X-rays, it would show as a black box, and that black box would eventually be marked for manual inspection. So there is no other clear way that now we can try to shield this horn from being detected. So, yes.
Yeah, good job. Now, I would like to go to this area, the one that you mentioned, that the nuclear policy, let's say like that,
Yes.
mark all of those rhinos or the part that injected by isotope as illegal to possess.
Yes.
That is the law, right?
Yes.
Now, a law will have its own purpose,
Yes.
right? You mentioned earlier that the isotope is harmless to
Yes.
the animal, to the the natural life, the nature, and so on. How can something that harmless is protected by some so specific regulation that even if you own it,
Yes.
it's illegal? So I suspect there is something that any danger or something that is it's protecting against.
Okay. Thank you very much for that question. So basically, to clarify again, the law is not exactly to make these radioactive horns as legally classified as a material out of regulatory control. But the law lies where the material out of regulatory control should be acted upon. So basically, material out of regulatory control, to explain a little bit, is every type of radioactive material that is outside the hands of these certified people, these people who have authorities and actually handling and able to know what these radiation dangers are and how should we utilize them. So basically, every material, not only on these radioactive horns, but also other materials such as nuclear weapons and everything would fall right under this category. And radiation monitor, this radiation marked specimen, although yes, I did say that it was not harmful and it is basically non-toxic, non-leachable, and all that other stuff, this would still fall right under that classification, as there is still an amount of radiation that is specifically designed to reach the benchmark or the baseline of where it is now illegal to be handled by someone that is outside authorities.
Yeah. Having said, to follow up that statement,
Yes.
if someone, an ordinary person,
Yes.
come across to touch the material, is there any potent or possibility of danger harming the person whatsoever? Because you said that there is a threshold, right?
Yes.
If it is too close or too much, then perhaps a danger can happen.
Okay. So to touch the horns itself, like without taking out the radioactive pellets or anything, it is not harmful, as it is not harmful to the animal itself, who is in constant close proximity to the isotope. It will not be harmful for these people to acquire it, as touch it, or just touch it in that way. But however, when you illegally possess it, there are still ways that you could take out the pellets and directly contaminate directly to your hands and everything. So that would then be the dangers, which is what classifies it as a radioactive material out of regulatory control.
Well done.
All right, we need to move to Miss Denise.
Kayleen, wow, this was a really interesting topic, and I think you did a fantastic job presenting. You did a fantastic job researching. You clearly are passionate about this, and I love to see that. So well done, well done.
Thank you, Miss.
I also want to compliment you on your biblical worldview that you wove into this conversation in terms of how the story of humans and our responsibility to care for the environment and the ways that we fail to care for the environment are impacting this situation. And so really well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miss.
Okay, so because I'm not really a scientist, so for me, there was a lot of this paper that I was like, this is really hard for my brain to understand. And so you were so smooth in your presentation. So I followed it a little better when I listened to you than when I was working through the reading of it. Okay, so I'll just tell you that as a first-time person seeing this, I'm like, these are a bunch of words and they just seem like words and I don't know what they mean. So it was really technical for me. So I may be asking something you've already answered. So
Yes.
Forgive me if I'm asking something really simple.
It's okay, Miss.
But I'm wondering how you can be confident that the research that's conducted that says this radioactive material, this isotope, is not leachable and not toxic. I think in your paper and in your speech, you used the word unlikely to
Yes.
dissolve and release. So
Yes.
unlikely doesn't mean the same thing as impossible,
Yes.
correct?
Correct.
Okay, so help me understand this research and why we can think of this as safe.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. So I would like to address first the non-leachable part, in which through my research and through my understanding, this non-leachable part would mean that the isotopes would be localized and would be localized in these horns, and they would not provide any like spillage or in any case. So first, these radioactive isotopes are actually in forms of pellets, in which they're not liquid, so they cannot dissolve in a way that they are like spread all over the horns, but they're basically localized, and this part of localization has actually been done, like been studied way before this. They used the radioactive isotopes. So first they used like the stable versions of these isotopes, like for example for carbon-14 is the radioactive one. The stable one would be carbon-13, the stable isotopes. And so they used the non-radioactive one, the safer isotopes inside, and they made sure that after long exposure and everything, that didn't move at all. So after extensive process of 3D modeling and all that kind, they ensured that it is non-leachable. It is, once again, it would be localized and would not move away. And for the non-toxic part, I think I already described also about how it would not provide any other chemical reactions other than the radiation itself.
Okay, so there's a difference between, say, the dangerous, highly toxic radioactive isotope and the non-radioactive. No, they're both radioactive, but the poisonous one and the non-poisonous one, basically, right? Is that what you're saying?
Simplified, yes.
Okay,
In a
simplified way.
in a simplified
Okay.
way.
All right. So, so then I'm trying to understand your argument in your third proof, I believe, about
Yes.
trying to address, which I really love that you're saying that so much of the wildlife trafficking fight has been focused on the harvesters and not really making it all the way to the consumer and the people who are demanding the product, right?
Yes.
And so you're trying to get this to how do we kind of create a holistic solution for wildlife trafficking. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if I'm understanding this, it seems like we're saying, well, it's safe, it's non-leachable, it's harmless, yet it's going to crash the market because no one will want it because it has this radioactive material.
Yes.
So it feels like it's in contradiction.
Yes.
Help me understand that.
Right. Thank you very much for that section. So basically, in that, I would like to address, once again, going back to the definition of deterrence itself. It's the effort to reduce the likelihood of deviance and fear of detection and punishments for the offense. So actually what makes a big difference in crashing this market is, once again, the fear of detection, the fear of being detected during the transport, and therefore punishments for the offense. And on top of that, also, there is still a huge stigma behind how this radioactivity, and therefore, for like a lot of people, so the usage of rhino horns right now, the biggest sectors would be like for furniture or like for decoration in your house. And people would still have stigma. I don't want any radioactive, although it's harmless, I don't want any radioactive specimen in my house.
I see.
And for medicine, traditional medicines too. So these radioisotopes would not be consumable in a way like...
That's really my question. I was really thinking about that in Chinese medicine.
Yes.
And so if you're trying to transfer or convert this horn into some kind of traditional Chinese medicine,
Exactly.
is it really actually still safe for someone to consume? Let's say they somehow used lead boxes and escaped all detection and they make it into a traditional Chinese medicine.
Yes.
If I consume that, have I now created some kind of long-term damage that I'm unaware of?
Right. For that one, I think that in a way that these radioactive isotopes, yes, they are harmful. They are not harmful to the touch, and they're not harmful to the animals themselves. But in consumption, that would be a different case, as the long-term exposure would then definitely change a little bit of like, there would still be this radioactivity in the keratins of the horns, and when these horns are grated and the powders are then consumed, then it would cause effects to the biological system, of course.
Right. Okay. That's what I wanted to know. So that's why I was trying to understand. So it's not harmful in in a broad way, but it's
Yes.
definitely harmful for consumption. So it's going
course.
to impact the consumer at the end. And a
Yes.
consumer would want to ensure that I'm not ingesting something that's actually going to create more harm. Okay, got it. So now we've sort of honed in, or at least on your thesis, you've really focused on this rhinoceros and the rhinoceros horn. But as you mentioned, there's 44,000, is that what you said?
Yes.
Other animals that are regularly illegally trafficked in this transnational trafficking kind of scope.
Yes.
So are all animals being trafficked because of something that we can gain from them that we would be consuming? Or are there other reasons for trafficking? And how would your radioactive nuclear science solution address that? Because it seems like you can't just put a pellet inside of a bird, for instance. Mr. Wade loves birds, and birds are trafficked all the time, or reptiles and other things, not necessarily for consumption, but just as you mentioned in your history section, just because people that are wealthy like to show off they have something fancy, right, and rare. So how would this help in that scenario?
Thank you very much for that. So basically, so far, I would like to address the development of the technology so far. So instead of rhinos, although the many data shows is for rhinos, this implementing nuclear science into these animals have developed into pangolins and elephants, which is one of the two main, also the two main animals that are trafficked around the world for their ivories and for their scales. But also to address your first question about like, is it truly just trafficking for something that we take? No, there's still smuggling, as you mentioned, and a lot of it is actually very near to us, such as the bird market.
The bird market,
in
yeah.
Festival City. So that bird market is actually for smuggling. That's a type of smuggling. And I believe that nuclear science could be a solution, once again, to this, because further advancements could be done, although right now there has not been. But probably these radioactive materials would be inserted using, in a way, pellets, because older studies have shown that surrounding it with like sodium sulfite solutions could actually stop the harmful particle decays. So basically, that would still be safe for the animal in consumptions. Like basically, the animal would have these pellets inside their body, and also probably in their beaks, in their claws, and everything. So there are still ways in which, this is why I also addressed in my para ratio that it should be categorized in the chemical and biological standpoint of these animals, so that further advancements could be done. So for like animals with a basis of keratins, we could use a certain part.
I see. So you're not saying it exists yet. You're just saying, you're arguing this should continue to be explored because this is going to be the cheapest, most effective, most detectable system that we could do to deter the wildlife trafficking trade.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay.
Time's up. You did a great job, Kayleen. Okay, so here's the plan. Right now, we're going to invite friends, family, panelists, and advisors up to the stage to get photos, and then we're going to start our next